Okay. I'm just gonna.
Hey, Mike,
Excellent.
I'm not showing up.
Okay, can everybody see? Is everybody good?
I can hear, but I can't.
I'm
Yeah,
not.
I can see.
I'm gonna hit record. Did everybody get a message saying that this is being recorded?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I think it's 10 o'clock, so let's start. Welcome everyone to Master Gardeners from Hamilton County, third Saturday class for February. And we're glad you're with us. Our guest speaker for today is Kendra Ware, who is a master gardener and a master beekeeper. And she is going to let us know and instruct us and give us all kinds of information on beekeeping, the importance of bees. And Kendra, if you want to give a little bit of your background and just start us off.
Okay, thanks, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
Suzanne. My name is Kendra Ware, and as she said, I am a master gardener and a master beekeeper. I first started out in beekeeping, and then some of you may know Nancy Williams told me you can't be a good beekeeper without being, a master beekeeper without getting the master gardener too, because it all goes together, which I hope I explained today why, yes, it does all go together. You can't have one without the other because they're both aspects are important of that. And I love to learn about things that I'm passionate about, bees being one of them. So that's why I pursued my master gardener, and I'm glad I did. And why is that not working? Okay, hang on. Give me 1 second. I think we're having technical difficulties here.
And this gives me an excuse to remind people that if you have questions, put them in the chat and we'll take them up at the end.
All right, give me a second. I think I'm gonna have to share this a different way.
Okay.
For some reason, it won't let me change to the next slide, which is important.
Did you just share the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, let me see if now I can. All right.
Good.
I shared the wrong screen. Now we're on track. My dad, this is a picture, some pictures of my daughter, which I'll talk about later, but I'll let you just look at them while I talk. But my dad was a gardener, and we have adjoining land to other of my relatives who were beekeepers. And during that time that they were beekeepers, his garden flourished. Well, as they got older and wanted to get out of beekeeping, he noticed a decline in his garden. So he tried to recruit them again to start beekeeping, and he didn't. Well, my daughter heard the conversation one day, and that's her in this picture. Her name is Velvet. And she said, well, I think my mom shouldn't have been an engineer. I think she should have been an entrepreneur. So why don't you pay us or help us get started in beekeeping? So my dad did 6 years ago. We got started in beekeeping and absolutely love it. I have some pictures of her here of some of our beekeeping activities. I think one of my favorites is the top middle. We went to get a swarm, And a swarm is where, which I'll tell you more about later, but a swarm is where the hive gets crowded. So part of the bees move away and they'll gather in a place, somebody's yard or something, and you can just go get them and add them to your collection of bees. So we went to get the bees, and I had an SUV at the time. I threw the bees in the back and I jumped in, and she goes, "Are you crazy? You're going to get in that vehicle with all those bees flying around?" And I said, "Well, yeah." So she kept her bee suit on, and we got the bees downtown, and we were driving home, and we pull up at a red light, and she looks over at somebody with her bee suit and the bees on the window. And of course they were very confused and tried to get away from us as quick as they could. And she turned around and laughed at me, and that's one of my favorite pictures. And on the left, that is where I'm in the background working, and she is eating honey out of our hives, because there is nothing like fresh honey on the cone out of hives. So we got started into beekeeping 6 years ago, and we have a passion for beekeeping. We have a passion for trying to use the products of the hive to become healthier, promoting the natural products if we can. But our favorite, besides bees, is to talk about advocating for adoption, which we passionately do. She was my foster child. Just a little brief on her, and then I'll get started. But she was my foster child. She was 10 years old when she came to live with us, and we decided to get out of fostering and just adopt her. I'm very proud of her today. She's 21, in college, has an internship at Unum, and is giving back to the community by being one of the founding board members of the Youth Coalition working with homeless youth in Chattanooga. So I'm excited about all she's doing. But enough about her, I'll get on with our subject. And feel free, like she said, to ask questions. And if there's something that you don't understand on a slide and you want to ask it immediately, that's fine. So when you get into beekeeping, there are so many factors that you have to look into and have to understand, and definitely have to appreciate in being a beekeeper, and I think a gardener. And so I'm going to back up a little bit from the beekeeping and start with pollinators and tell you a little bit about pollinators if you're unfamiliar with this subject. Many of the plants that we have today have to have a pollinator for them to have fruit. So the pollinator will bring the pollen from the female to the male part of the plant and allow that plant to fruit. And there are many types of pollinators out there. There are bees, that's one section of them. We'll talk about them later. Wasps, butterflies, bats, birds, all kinds of pollinators that are important. If we lost those pollinators, if we didn't have them anymore, I read articles that said that 3 out of every 4 items of produce in the produce section would be gone. That out of every 100 crops that are important to us, or that are the most popular crops across the world, 70% of them would be gone. So we can't go on gardening and wanting stuff to be successful without first taking a mention of these pollinators and make sure we're understanding them and make sure we're giving them a good habitat to live in. Now, of course, my favorite part of the pollinators is bees, but once I got started having a bee-friendly environment in my house, I couldn't help but give notice and start taking pictures of some of the other pollinators that I was helping. This is a picture I took in my backyard when I realized that I needed to help pollinators. I immediately went out and planted a couple of butterfly trees or butterfly bushes. So I caught that one on there. This is a rose of Sharon bloom, and there is a bumblebee that's down in the pollen and taking advantage of that. And of course, I created a good habitat for the birds that are around to help in the pollination. So that's a big scale look at at pollinators. There's any more that we could talk about. Is there a question? But now I want to get into bees. And bees specifically of North America, there are a lot of different bees out there, but I want to make one mention here. If you noticed on the first screen, there are bees and there are wasps, two different subjects here. Bees such as honeybees and some of our native bees are pollinators, but also wasps. Wasps are things like yellow jackets, the Asian hornet that you heard so much, the murder hornet you heard so much about, which led me pause to say that even though it's a lot on the media right now, it has not been found in this area and not a threat to our honeybees in this area. However, it is being monitored to make sure that it doesn't come along. So honeybees is the first thing I look at, but as I started creating a good environment in my home for honeybees, I started noticing some of the native bees and other bees coming back into my garden and my surrounding area. I didn't get a very good picture of any of the native bees, which I was a little disappointed, but I did find this carpenter bee pollinating flowers one morning. And I love that picture of him. The next one, and I'm going to tell a little story here with this. It was when I became a master gardener that I realized that the loofah sponge that you use in the showers and things like that, for some reason I had always thought it was something that came out of the ocean. And I recently found that you grow it and it's a squash and you can grow it in your garden. So I immediately had to plant some. And this is a bumblebee pollinating one of the plants for the loofah squash. And keep in mind that loofah squash, we'll come back to it in a minute. Anytime I travel, I have to go try to find some of the native bees in the area. This Christmas, we went to Costa Rica, and I actually stumbled upon some stingless bees. And these bees are supposed to have the best honey, even better than honeybees. However, it's very hard. The way they like to live in their environment, it's hard for you to have a hive of stingless bees and be able to harvest the honey, because the honeybee that we use is the Western honeybee, and it's just more conducive, which I'll tell you about that later. But those are some stingless bees I found at the base of a straggler fig tree in Costa Rica. And I was really excited to find those, because that is a native bee for Costa Rica. Maybe in future talks, I will catch some native bees here from the Tennessee area, but to this point, I've not gotten any good pictures. But I love that. I love being able to find those in Costa Rica and getting to see them in their natural habitat. I talked to you a little bit about the wasp. I had this picture just so you could see the difference. This is a sunflower in my garden. The top bee is, of course, the honeybee. The honeybees that we have here are Apis mellifera. They are called the Western honeybee. There's many different types of them. If you actually go and Google honeybees, there are even more types around the world. For example, if you've seen those honeybee hives hanging on the side of cliffs, those are a different type of honeybee than what we cultivate here in the United States. The bottom bee is a yellow jacket. I just brought this picture to so you could see the difference. I will say that yellow jackets are not my favorite. I do try to, if they are not in an area that's harming my family, I try to let them be because they are pollinators, but we don't want those being near the garden or areas that they can hurt my family. So I'm going to pause here. I just wanted to get you a brief overview of pollinators in general, but I want to pause here. And if there's any questions that you want to ask me so far before I actually get into the subject of bees. All right, so I'll move on. So the really reason that we came here was to talk about bees. And I wanted to give you a perspective of what is going on in the hive and what type of bees, honeybees there are in each one of the colonies. The hive is actually the wooden structure. The bees themselves is called a colony. And that's just some verbiage to get you to understand what a beekeeper is talking about. But most people do call them hives, and that's perfectly fine. I will say that once I started keeping bees, we did notice an uptake in how our garden was performing that year. So it was very relevant. I don't have actual data, but I will tell you from just watching the garden grow and being involved in it that bees are a very vital part. So when we look at these,
Noticing how
this,
when there's somebody doing bees.
I need you all to mute yourselves. Some people are talking, or I can. All right, go on.
thank you. So when we start looking at a colony of bees or a hive of bees, here's what one typically looks like on a hot summer day. The inside of the hive is kind of hot, so they're just like we do in the South, hanging out on the front porch, trying to keep cool. But I picked this picture to show you that when a beekeeper is going in to look inside the hive, there are approximately 60,000 to 100,000 bees in each one of these stacks that you see here. And when a beekeeper gets in, they are looking for one particular bee. There are 3 types of bees in there. The one that they're always aware of is the queen bee, because the queen is the one that lays the eggs and keeps the hive going. So if you don't have the queen laying the eggs, the hive is going to essentially die. So it is very important when you go in and look at the hive that you understand if the queen is there. But again, I tell you, there's 100,000 bees in there, or could be. So could you imagine going up to this hive and trying to figure out if that bee is actually finding that one bee? So there are things that beekeepers do, which I'm going to tell you about more, but I wanted you to understand how many bees you're actually filtering through to find this one bee. So as I said, there's 3 types of bees in a hive. Here's another view that were before I start talking about the queen. Here's another view. I actually let this hive go and I had some empty space and I did not understand, but the pollen and the nectar flow had started. And so they built all this cone in the extra space. You could see the frames down below, but this is another view just to let you know of how many bees are actually in that hive when we're looking at it. Okay, so there's 3 types of bees in a hive. 99%, 95%, 99% of the hive are actually female bees, which consist of 2 types. And then that other percentage is drone bees, which we'll talk about them later. But of your female bees, the one that you always are thinking about is the queen bee. And I have several pictures of here. By the way, all these pictures are pictures that I've taken myself because I speak to it with more passion when I'm looking at that. But these are actually pictures that I've taken from my hive, and it shows you the different variations of the queens. And I love looking at those because I just love seeing the different colorings and the stripings. And so I tried to get a variety of pictures here for you to look at. But if you notice, one has a little stripe on them, one's a little darker than the others, but these are different types of queens, because even though we have the Apis mellifera here, which is the Western honeybee, there are different variations. There are the buckfast bees, the carnelians, the Africanized bees, which we have very little here, but there may be a percentage of there. There are the Italians, and you could see that here. So even though the actual bees are honeybees, there are different varieties, and that's what I wanted to show. The queen herself, when she's in the hive, does control the tone of the hive because every bee in there has part of her DNA. If she lays a female egg, which we'll talk about later, then they have half her DNA and half of the drone DNA, the male DNA. If she lays a male egg, it's completely her DNA. So she does set the tone, but all the bees do care for her. And this is just a video of one of my bees, my queen. If you can see, she's the one there with the longer abdomen. And if you notice, all the worker bees just move out of her way. The worker bees always seem to surround her because they care for her needs. They bring her food, they clean her up. Anything she needs, they provide for her because her sole function in there is to lay eggs. So that is the reason she's always surrounded. Now, there are 2 times in her life that she may leave the hive. And the first time is when she's born. She's considered a virgin queen. And I know you've heard about virgin flights. So what she does is when she's at a certain age, she will actually fly from the hive and mate with different drones in the area and then come back to the hive. And with that time that she's mated with her 7 or 8 drones, she will lay eggs for the rest of her life. Her lifespan is about 2 to 3 years. And during that time, she can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day in peak periods. And that really depends on the weather. She is not going to lay that many eggs during the winter time because they'll reduce the number of bees in there that they have to make sure they can survive the winter on the food that they have. But in the summer, when the plants are blooming and they're at their height of wanting to pollinate and collect that nectar, it is possible that she lays up to 2,000 eggs a day. Like I said, when you're looking for that one bee in that cluster of bees, sometimes it's difficult. So what beekeepers do will look for signs of bees. The picture I have here are some larvae that I found, and some of them they're all larvae. The larvae that I found in my hive. And the reason you look for signs is because if you find larvae, you know that your queen has been there within the last 5 to 10 days. And so what happens is the queen lays her egg, and then after 3 days, it'll start falling over and it becomes this larva creature. And the nurse bees, who are also women, we'll talk about those too, will feed them until they mature. All beekeepers love to find this, and this is eggs in their hives. When they're first laid, they'll be standing straight up, but as they mature over the next 3 days, they'll start bending over, and that's where I say they become the larva stage, which will eventually hatch out to be more bees in the hive. Typically, what you're seeing here is definitely the worker bees, and I'll explain that later. So even though the queen is the queen of the hive, she also has a very important role of maintaining the hive and keeping it sustainable as laying the eggs. And when she starts aging out, she will be replaced by another queen. But remember that the next queen still has some of the DNA of the previous queen. So that's how she sets the tone. If the hive decides that they want to have a new queen, they will take one of these eggs that are 3 days or less old, and they will start feeding that particular egg royal jelly, which will, because they're feeding it the royal jelly, it will develop into a queen bee. The other eggs, they're probably going to feed, or they will feed just a little bit of honey and some pollen, and they will just develop into either the worker bee or the drone. These particular hives are, I mean, these particular ones are going to be worker bees just because of, I know where I took them out of the hive, but the size of the square that they're in and the depth of it is how you can tell if you're in the hive. You can't tell from this picture, but that was be if you were out in there. Does anybody have any other questions on the queen before I move on?
Feel free to unmute if you have a question.
Could you repeat what the larva gets fed from the workers?
Oh, okay. The larva gets fed,
Royal jelly?
no, the larva gets fed, well, the bee get fed royal jelly if it's going to be a queen bee.
Okay, thank you.
And there's only,
Where-
yeah.
Where
and
did they, oh, go, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, if they're gonna just be a worker bee or something, they'll feed it just pollen and a little bit of honey or nectar.
What
it-
consists of the royal jelly? Where does that come from and what is that?
Huh. I don't know that I've ever been asked that question. I saw Nancy on the line. Do you know that answer? I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to ask another expert.
No, I don't.
That's a good question. I don't know that I've ever been asked that, but you know what? I will research it and I'm sure there's some way I could send you out the answer. I know it's royal jelly is like a more compact food for them and allows the queen, because the queen is a bigger bee, so she's going to grow bigger and it allows her body to develop. But yeah, I'll have to research that. Huh. I've never been so stumped before on bees. Okay.
I have one question. What happens is there a time when the old queen bee and the new queen bee are in the hive at the same time?
Actually, yes. If you ask some of the older beekeepers, they were always in the mindset that once one queen is gone, another one would arrive. But there have actually been cases where when the daughter queen is superseding the older queen, they'll both be in the hive. It's rare, and most beekeepers, when they find it, are very excited and they'll immediately put it on Facebook and YouTube, so you can find cases out there. But most of the time, one queen is gone and then they make another one.
Okay. So there's no transition of one to the other officially by the bees.
No.
Thank you.
Because unfortunately, this is kind of brutal. Unfortunately, most of the time when they want a new queen, the worker bees understand that their old queen is failing and they don't want the whole colony to die. So they will get rid of her. I'll just leave it at that. Get rid of her to make room for a new queen. Because if they don't get rid of her, if it's not a relationship that other queen is allowing it, if they don't get rid of her, then she will try to kill the new queens that are coming. And if she is failing, if she's getting older and not able to lay the eggs, then they don't want to take the chance that she can kill the new queen coming aboard.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. What are the lifespans for the worker and drone bees?
I don't really know that I know about drones because they just have one little function in the hive. But worker bees, depending on the season, in the summer, they only last 3 to 4 months. In the winter, they last a little longer. And we'll get to talking about that more, but the worker bees are the ones that go out and and forage for the honey and for the nectar and the pollen. So they actually just really fly themselves to death. And if you got a picture of an older worker bee, you would notice that her little wings are just tattered and starting to fail, because they literally fly in their lifetime the equivalent of 1.5 times around the circumference of the earth. So you can imagine that little bee flying, or the amount of time it would take to fly around the earth. So it's very hard on the body and they just don't have a huge lifespan. But the queen can last anywhere from 2 to 3 years. Some people say she can even last up to 5. I think what I've seen, more likely 2 to 3 years, but there are different studies that say she could last longer. Any other questions before I get started on the worker bee? Okay, so I told you that there are 2 types of female bees, and then the drone, which we'll talk about last. So the second type of female bee is the worker bee. I love this picture that I have where I above the words worker bee, because that is actually, the bees have sacs on their legs where they go out and collect the pollen. The pollen gets all over their little hairs, and they will clean that pollen off and put it in these little sacs on the side of their legs to actually bring them home. The bottom picture has some brood that you can see, the little brown areas that are capped over. That is actually a pupae, a worker bee that will be hatched soon. And they've covered it over with a wax coating so it can continue to develop. And if you look really closely, you could see some larvae in there, and I don't think any eggs, but there's also some pollen in there, but I got a better picture of that where you can see it better. But as you see, these are worker bees that are nurse bees. The nurse bees will take care of the young. When they first come out, they'll feed them like we talked about earlier. And then they progress to being foragers and also protecting the hive. Now, this is the same bee. So when they hatch, they'll turn around, they'll clean up the little cell that they were born out of, and then they start taking care of the bees that are beside them that have not fully hatched or are in the process of becoming a bee. Once they've done that, they probably will move to being a bee that takes out debris from the hive and removes it, because they're very clean natured. They want to have their hive clean of anything that shouldn't be in there. So the worker bees will begin, an undertaker, I guess is the best word. They'll carry out dead bees. If they find a pupae or something of the bee that's developing that they think is diseased, they'll carry it out and dump it outside. Then they go move to the outside of the hive, which that's what some of the picture at the top is, bees that are protecting the hive from intruders coming in. And then lastly, they'll start foraging. So they'll start going out every day and collecting the pollen and the nectar. Oh goodness, didn't turn my phone on. Okay. The only other thing that I would like to say about the worker bee, which to me amazes me, especially if you like honey, each one of those worker bees will collect enough nectar in their lifetime to produce 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. 1/12 of a teaspoon. And if I'm in person, I always bring 1/12 of a teaspoon to show you exactly how much that is. But it is just amazing to me to think of how many bees are out there producing the honey that I put in my tea every morning to do that, because 1/12, that's just a tiny little bit. and yet we get all the honey we do. This is a frame, and I always like showing this picture because all those white cappings, now you notice when I told you the baby bees, the hatching bees, they have brown cappings. These white cappings are actually honey that has been put into a frame on a hive that I have. So what happens with honey is they'll go to the flowers, they'll forage the nectar, they'll bring it back and they'll put it into those little hexagon shapes that they've created. They put it in there and they begin a dehydrating process. So the nectar has more water in it. And when it becomes honey, it has become dehydrated. They've reduced the amount of water in there and it becomes honey. So that's how they make their honey, and it does in the sides. I should have mentioned before, but those little hexagon shapes that they make, they actually make those. When I put a frame inside a hive, it is completely flat, and they will build that shape onto the hive themselves, the frame themselves, where they go out and collect them. They will go out and collect the nectar and actually consume it for themselves. And on their abdomens will have a process where they can develop the wax, and it oozes out, and they'll collect it and form it into those hexagon shapes. But it takes about 3 times the nutrients of the nectar to produce that wax. So a lot of times beekeepers will reuse some of these frames after they take the honey out. They'll give it back to them so they don't have to expend that energy to make more. Okay, I think that's getting to the end of my slides on the worker bees, and I guess I will pause here to ask if there are any questions about worker bees.
Is the hexagon shape, the wax, is that what you call the honeycomb?
Yes, that is the honeycomb.
Okay, so you can reuse the honeycomb.
Yes. Okay, this is probably getting a little technical. I won't spend a lot of time in it, but we can to a certain degree. But what we have found, so the hive has wood in it. It has the wax that the bees build, and then it does have some plastic or something, other things. But what we have found is that the wax is the worst at getting the pesticides and pulling in the pesticides. So after 3 to 4 years, we do throw it away and don't use that wax in there because we're trying to minimize the amount of pesticides. And even though you may not use it in your yard, I try to minimize the type of pesticides I use in my yard. They can forage up to 5 miles away from me. I can't control what everybody does in a 5-mile radius. So we do reuse it to a certain point, but then we do throw it away and let them build fresh after probably around 3 to 4 years to make sure that we're controlling the amount of pesticides in the hive. Did that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, do you all have an idea of why they picked the hexagonal shape versus another shape?
I got this story from a beekeeper, an old timey beekeeper. That's probably bad language, but someone who had kept bees. He's probably in his 60s now, but he kept bees since he was 8 years old. I haven't been able to find this in anything documented, but it makes sense to me. So what he says is, like I told you, that they consume the nectar. It's extruded, the wax is extruded out of their abdomen. And I should have had a picture of that. I will in the next time I get this presentation. So the wax is extruded out of their abdomen. The bees, using their antennae, will get that wax and work it into a soft, pliable form. And what he says is that the space between the antennae on the head of the bee is the exact same width as that hexagon shape. So they begin to press forward with that wax into that shape using their head, and their head is what makes that so perfect every time, because every bee's space between their antennae is that same space, that same width. Like I said, I haven't found that in books written anywhere, but I did get that from some of my mentors that I talked to about beekeeping, because I love to talk about beekeepers who have been keeping around the area. And I have looked for it, and I'll continue to look for it to see if it's science, but it makes sense to me.
I
One
don't- oh.
question I have is, I'm wondering if the honeycomb is full of pesticides, and oftentimes one sees the honeycomb available for purchase with the honey. And I know a lot of people like to eat the honeycomb, but it sounds to me like that's not a good idea.
You know, I would have to do more research on that. I do know that. So here's one thing to consider. Most of the comb that's out there for you to purchase, it's only in the hive. They put a frame out there for them to build the honeycomb and cut out immediately. So it's never in the hive for more than a season, typically. But I can't answer that. That is a good point. Does anybody else have any thoughts about that? You know, you bring up a great point and something that I think I'm going to research after this topic, but I don't want to tell you not to, because there are a lot of great things that come from beeswax. You know, it's antibacterial. There's a lot of good properties involved in it. But the amount of pesticides just for being in the hive one season will not be, you know, this is a buildup over 3 seasons that we see the most issues with, and we're being conservative. The wax could stay in there a little bit longer, but that's just where we see the buildup. But you bring up a very good point and something that you might want to think about, and I will think about before you buy it the next time.
This is Charlie Davidson. We none of us probably ever escape consuming some pesticides in foods that we eat. And it's probably like you're saying, just a very minimal amount. I've never eaten honeycomb, so it's not a problem for me. But anyway, I wouldn't think you'd have to eat an awful lot to have any effects in your body.
That's a true statement. That's very true. I mean, even the produce you buy at the store, you probably, unless you are always completely buying organic, you probably have some residual pesticides and things like that in it.
Is there any lab or any place that would actually be able to test your beeswax for pesticides?
I'm sure there is, but that's a huge cost. You know, I think so organic honey would be what you would get if you don't want any pesticides. Well, there's only one place in the world that can still claim to have organic honey, because they don't have the amount of pesticides that the rest of the world does. And even that is kind of scary, because I read an article where that country is only capable of producing 1 million pounds of this honey, yet there is 1.5 million pounds of this honey in the market. So somewhere there's a 500,000 amount of honey that's being sold as this organic honey without pesticides that is not being produced there. I mean, that's the only conclusion you can come from that. So there are so many things about the honey market that you have to take into consideration. And I don't want to get off into this and you think honey is a bad product, because it's not. But just like everything else, there are people out there that take advantage of the situation and use it and sell things that are not true to what they're advertising. I mean, that even comes into play, and I didn't want to get into this, but that even comes into play with local honey that you buy here. People will go out and say they're selling local honey, but yet they have bought honey from another country and maybe mixed it with their own local honey, or they just aren't even selling local honey. They don't even have hives, but they're selling it as local honey. So you have that problem everywhere.
Just to say, something I'm just reading says that while the honeycomb does, attract or some pesticide, it isn't like 1-to-1. They found that there are small amounts, not like enormous amounts of pesticide. It isn't like, so there's, even if you were in a place where you weren't using any and yet your bees went out somewhere, it's, unless you lived in a place where they were carpet bombing pesticide, you probably would be,
Yes. Yeah.
Getting as much as you'd get anywhere.
Right. And that's what I was telling you. It's very conservative for beekeepers to take that wax frame out after 3 years. But beekeepers, I mean, they treat their bees as their kids. So if you thought something was bad for your kids, you would remove it from their life. And that's kind of how we are. I mean, these are our babies. I know most people don't have babies who can sting you and hurt you, but that's just the life of a beekeeper. And we're very passionate about the health of the bees. And the way we do that is removing the wax, even though, like we've discussed, it's a residual amount. I guess the way I would look at it, I would rather have a little residual amount of something like that and eat something as good for me as honey versus going to McDonald's and get chicken McNuggets. My lifespan, I think, would be better, but that would just be my personal take. And I don't expect anybody else to have mine. So are there any other questions? Or are we ready to move on to drones? So this is the one picture that I did not take. You can see there that I got it. But the reason I wanted to put this picture on there is I want to show you the difference between a drone, a queen, and a worker bee. The top is a drone. And like I said, they comprise probably 3% of the hive, depending on the season, but between 5 and 1%. In the summer, there are a lot more drones. In the winter, there's not. I'll tell you a little bit about them later. But you see, the bottom is the worker bee, the middle is the queen bee, and the top is the drone. And the drone is the only male presence in the hive. So you can see the difference in the different top bees. The drone's only function in the hive is to mate with the queen. And she does not mate with drones from her own colony, because I remember what I told you, a drone is made from only her DNA. So she wouldn't want to mate with a drone from her colony, because if she did, when she actually laid a female egg, she would have only her own genetics in there. So she flies off to an area of drone congregation. There's been studies done about it, but there are areas around your hive where drones will congregate. The queens will come there, as we talked about, their virgin flight. They can mate with up to 6 to 8 drones. They'll come back and they'll be in the hive for the rest of their life unless they swarm, which we'll talk about later, and they'll lay eggs. So the drones are in the hive, they hang around, they eat, but their real primary function is going out and mating with the queen. Once they've mated with the queen, they will die. And well, nothing said about that. They'll, once they mate with the queen, they die off, and they're never, you know, they just die. The other thing that people story they like to hear, and I'm sorry to any men on there, it's not against you, but a lot of times if you go out when it's getting close to winter, and the queens will not go out and mate in winter because there's so many hazards of her getting back since it's cold, bad weather. So when it gets close to winter, the worker bees will actually throw all the drones out of the hive and not allow them re-entry, because they're bulling down, they're getting to their minimum amount of bees that they need, so they don't have to feed any of those drones during the winter. It's kind of a sad time, but people like to hear the story about them kicking them all out and not allowing them in. And the reason for that is if the queen is viable, she can just lay new drones when spring starts and they need them again. And when spring starts, there's more sources of pollen, or the nectar and pollen, so they're able to feed more of the bees, and they bring them back because they want to propagate the life of the plant, of the hive. So that's really all I can tell you about drones. I actually don't have a picture of them, but I have a video coming up where it has a drone in it that you might can pick out when you're watching it. But the main thing you have to see is he doesn't have a stinger, so his abdomen doesn't come to a point. It's kind of a blunt edge, and it's kind of fuzzy. So you can see that. The queen obviously has a stinger and a point. She actually, I didn't bring this up before, she can actually sting multiple times because she defends her right to be the queen, which is why I said sometimes the worker bees will take care of a queen that is failing. So she can sting multiple times. The worker bee, once they sting you, they also die. So it's really their last line of defense to sting you, and they typically will only do it in protection of their colony because they sense you as an intruder. But anyway, so are there any questions on drones before I move on?
So just to clarify, then the main purpose of a colony producing drones is for those drones then to go out and mate with the queen of another colony as a way to keep genetic diversity going in the species?
Yes. And I have a whole speech that I've done on that, but I didn't want to get too, but yes, exactly. I mean, when I got into beekeeping, I just thought I would be a beekeeper and not, but the more I learn about them and the more I understand them, the more beautiful creature I think they are. But yes, exactly true. So the queen has let me explain that a little more. The queen has the option to lay either an egg that's going to be a male or the egg that's going to be a female. And remember, a female can either be a worker or the queen, depending on how they feed her. So when she lays that egg, if it's a male bee, it's all her DNA. She does not include any DNA from another, from the other drone. If she lays a female egg, she'll include DNA from another drone in there to lay the egg. And that's the reason when you look at a colony of bees, you'll notice that primarily, probably some of them are all closely colored, but there will be others that have a different color variation on their body. And that's because she's mated with a drone from another genetic that's different genetically than her and causes that. And I have a really good video where I think you'll be able to see some of that toward the end. Any more questions?
How long do the drones usually live? It sounds like they have a pretty short life.
Yeah, I don't remember exact number, but but after one season, they're pretty much all gone. If you opened a colony during the winter, which you don't, you would not, if you found one drone in there, it would be a miracle. You just typically don't find them because they don't have any of those, like say the probably starting September to February. Well, no, February, they're coming back. Let's say September to January, they just don't have a really good function. They don't have something to do. So they don't, she will not choose to lay a male egg to produce a drone. And they, like I said, they kick a lot of them out.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I hope I didn't offend anybody, but that's just the way it is.
Nature is nature.
That's true. And that's how they're sustainable. So I'm going to circle back and say that, you know, pollinators are important. I'm sitting here sipping my cup of tea with almond milk and honey. If the pollinators went away, I wouldn't have my cup of tea in the morning. I would probably be very grouchy. You know, other things that we would lose, melons, berries, some types of squash. So pollinators are very important and we should treat them as such. Not just honeybees, all of them, but my passion is honeybees. And so I wanted to show you a couple of pictures here. There's some more pictures of my honeybees pollinating my my sunflowers that I grew. And if you notice, if you could see the bee that's on the yellow flower, you could see that it has a lot of pollen on its abdomen and everything. Like I said, that's because they have the hairs all over their body and they will collect all that pollen off those hairs and stuff it in their little bags that they carry on their legs. And then they'll actually put it in one of the cells in the hive. And I have a picture of that later. So as you see, that's really only the reason I put it there to show you that and how the bees do pollinate. Here's some more pictures of my bees pollinating and looking for nectar. I think the one with the pink flower is actually going in to get some nectar out of that plant. Those are colognes. I probably didn't pronounce that right. And I have an imposter here, I believe. When I put this other picture with the Rose of Sharon, I thought I had the one with the honeybee. It looks like I got the one with the bumblebee, but they're still pollinators and you can see, I like that one because you could see how the pollen is all over its body and you can just picture in your mind how they can use that to pollinate the plants. Here's another picture of my honeybees, and you notice that the bee at the bottom has the sacs full of pollen. It's not just got yellow legs, it has that. And if you notice, they're also, you can't notice as much, but they're two different shades of the bee. And those are definitely worker bees, like I said, because only the worker bees go out and do all this. And here's the last picture I took. And I put these pictures in here just to tell you how important it is that these bees are to what we love to do as master gardeners or as gardeners, or just people who like to go out and enjoy the outside and the beauty that it brings. We wouldn't have that. We wouldn't have a lot of food, but we also wouldn't have some of the beautiful flowers and plants that we do today without them. So as I said, I do have a picture of pollen inside my hive. I love this picture because it just shows all the variations of pollen that my bees have gone out and collected. And it's just really neat for me to see. What I'm going to talk about here is more about the products of the hive, pollen being one of them, but I wanted you to see how the different variations, the spots that are more of a liquidy, that's actually where they're putting nectar in. Because remember I told you that they feed their baby bees a combination of nectar and pollen. So they always put it in an area together, and if right outside of this, you'll see where it has brood baby bees, so they can quickly get to the what they want to feed it to feed their young. And that's the reason they put it like that. So pollen is one of the products of the hive. It's not something that I do, but when you get the little pollen, you can get pollen supplements and stuff. What they do is they'll have some kind of little gate that they crawl through, which will push the pollen out of the pockets on their legs, and that's how they get pollen supplements that you can buy at the store. It's just not something that I've got into. I'm just not sure. Again, like I say, beekeepers think their bees are their babies, and I don't like them squeezing in something that's hard for them to get through. So that's just my take. It's not anything official or scientific. So another product of the hive is, of course, the honey. I'm always super excited when I get the honey out the hive. And if you remember that slide I showed you, which had the capped honey on it, when a frame is fully capped like that, I have something that I put it in that actually spins and it slings the honey out, drains down, and we're able to put it in jars for everybody to enjoy, including myself. So that's always exciting. Some other products I could talk about along with honey is you can use it in skincare products. You can use it in mead, which is a form of alcohol that you can have with honey. And you can use it for skincare products, like I said, which the skincare products can also have the wax in it. One of the things I did, I told you that I got so excited when I found out that a loofah was actually a squash and not a sponge from the ocean, that this year I took some honey that I had, mixed it in a soap base, and added the loofah sponge in the center of it, poured it in, added. So this has honey and loofah, and I use it in the shower, and I love that. Another product of the hive that we talked about is wax. People use it to eat it, but we also can take wax and make art. Encaustic art is an very old form of art. If you look at like some of the cathedrals and stuff have it. You can also take the wax and make it into candles and lip balm and all kinds of stuff. One thing I would like to investigate is encaustics. The pictures on the left are pictures that my family or wax that my family has made. The picture on the right is the pictures that a local artist, if you're into that, Betsy Ross, if you Google her name, you can find her. She does encaustics. So the two pictures there are ones that inspired me to do what I did in my art, but she basically has layers of wax and oil on pieces of wood that you see here, and she makes art out of it. The two top pictures is we just put layers of color. Like we put a layer, for me, I put a layer of orange down, I put a layer of green, yellow, that's the top picture on the left. And then once it had hardened a little bit, I just scraped off the excess so you could see the color underneath. And that's something similar to what she did in her picture. My husband and daughter made the two middle pictures. They took a hot pen and actually put layers of wax down and took the hot pen and etched the designs they have here and then set it on fire to give that burnt look. So that's that. The bottom one is my rendition of a little house with a sunset, and where I got my inspiration. I wanted to do a church, but that was a little bit much for me to begin with. But I plan on, once I retire, to going back to that. I will tell you what's neat about the two middle pictures is we actually took wax from our own hives and they made those. So we still have the a little bit of wax that we took out of our first hives, and that's always exciting for a beekeeper. Another one of my favorite encaustic artist is Ava Roth. You can Google her too. I've never had the opportunity to meet her or work with her, but these are some of her pictures that I would love to get into. She is an artist that works with a beekeeper. She took pictures of the beekeeper and actually put them on a frame inside of the hive, and the bees actually built the honeycomb that you see here in these pictures. So that's just a neat thing to do. I haven't tried it because bees are finicky of where they build honeycomb, and I'm sure that it'll be a process, but I do plan, once I retire from my TVA job, to go back and try this in my own hive. The middle picture is where she still has the bees actually on it, but what she does on those is she makes art in the small circles, the hoops, and puts it in there. The top one is where she's done a little plant, she's beaded some of that. And then in the middle with some beading too. And she actually puts it, like I said, in the hive, and the bees build out the honeycomb, and then she takes it out and it's part of her artwork, which I think is pretty neat. So that's another way you can use wax that you get from the hive. There are so many things you can do. And I did fail to mention, so let's go back to that, is propolis. You get propolis from the hive, which is the sticky substance that the bees get from the trees, and they help seal up areas that they don't want any air to get through, or sometimes they're sealing up the holes to prevent things like hive beetles. I'm losing my word, but the hive beetles come in and can destroy their wax. So they don't want them in there, and they'll seal up the wax with this propolis. If you scrape it off, a lot of people make that a tincture that they use for medicinal purposes, and a lot of people swear by it. It takes a lot of work to scrape it off, and I'm going to tell you, at this point, I've scraped some off, but I haven't made a tincture, so I can't talk much about it. But a lot of people really love those, and it's a good way to get some more value out of the hive. And that's really all the hive products that I am familiar with. If you have any questions, I can. If not, I will talk a little bit about swarms. Does anybody have any questions about that?
There are a
We have
few
a-
questions on the chat.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. Charles, did you want to ask your question about predators and diseases, or were you going to address that, Kendra?
I can. Well, so just predators and diseases?
What are the major predators and diseases?
Okay. So predators is the word I was looking for. There's two that are visible that you can see very easily, and one is called a small hive beetle. And they'll get in there and they like to lay eggs in the hive, and they'll destroy what the bees are trying to lay their eggs. If a hive or a colony is strong, they can fight those back. And the second is wax moths. They love to eat the wax, and they can destroy a hive too. If, like I said, if you keep your bees strong and everything, they do have they do fight those off pretty well, but they can eat up a hive really bad and make it really nasty. I've had hives where I haven't tended to them as well and have lost them to these, but it's pretty rare. The other thing, and for the non-bee people, I don't want to get too far into this, but in 1986, just like in recent years, we had Corona introduced. The honeybee in the United States had called a varroa mite introduced, and it changed the view of beekeeping, because before 1986 they were really low maintenance, but now a beekeeper has to work on controlling those mites, and the reason is they're kind of like ticks for bees. These mites will get on the back of the bee, but they've been on other bees. So when they get on the backs of the bees and connect to their body, any bee virus that they've come in contact with will then be the bee that they're on will have, the host bee will be, will have to deal with that now. So that's how the bees get the viruses get moved around the bees. And as you've heard me say, bees are pretty social. They are structured to maintain their own colony, but they also want to propagate the species to other ones. So they intermingle with each other at the drone meeting place. There are drones from all different hives that come. If you have any sources of pollen or nectar, different types of bees come there. So they interact often. And if one hive has these mites, it'll jump off into another host. And once it gets on the bee, like it says, it will spread disease rapidly throughout your colonies. So that is the primary thing that a beekeeper has to do today, is make sure they keep those mites under control. Because once those mites get out of control, you've subject your bees to any virus that mite has been on a bee that they've had. And unfortunately, the mite's favorite place are bees that are declining, because they're easier subjects. And so they have probably have the viruses, and then it'll move on from other things. But it's called a varroa mite, and it's just a little miniature tick, the best way I can describe it, that gets on the bee and jumps from host to host. Its favorite place is it likes to get in the drone cells, where a drone bee is growing, maturing, because that's the biggest bee and it has a lot of room to move in. And the mother will get in there and have babies and infest even more bees. But that's the three things. Hive beetles and wax moths are something visible you can see. Mites, you can actually see them on occasion. They're hard to see, but they bring in viruses that you have to deal with. So it's better to control the mite than have to treat the disease, because a lot of times once they get those diseases, you just can't recover from it.
How do you control it? Do you know? That was a question on the chat.
How do you control mites?
Mm-hmm.
There are many ways. The saying in our bee club is, if you ask 5 beekeepers their opinions, you get six opinions out of each of, 6 opinions total. So everybody has a different one. I'll tell you several ways that we're doing. A lot of people will, so the mites really thrive in, like I said, the larvae. So a lot of people will go catch her queen and put her in a cage for a certain amount of time and let their colony go where it does not have any brood. So the mites really have no place to manifest themselves. Some people use mixtures of essential oils. This is something that I do. I mix up essential oils, and after I take the honey off that I'm gonna consume, I will feed the sugar water back with these essential oils, probiotics, and electrolytes back to my bees, and that helps keep the mites under control. Of course, there are different chemical type things that you use to treat the bees. There are strips that you put in the hives and they walk across it, and when they walk across it, they share it with all the other bees, and that'll kill the mites. There's oxalic acid. There are all different forms, and if you ask any type of beekeeper, they're just, everybody does it a little different. I go ask different beekeepers what they do, and I have a combination of what they do, but that's the general ways that you can treat them.
I have a couple of questions that are related. The first question is, what is the current status of colony collapse disorder in the US? And then the second question is, what are your thoughts about these efforts to take plants that normally rely on pollinators and genetically modify them so that they're self-pollinating? I think I read a couple years ago about research trying to create a self-pollinating almond tree, since again, bee colonies are on the decline and trying to figure out ways to, keep these crops going. Almost, it seems like, without them. What are your thoughts about that?
So let me start with colony disorder, colony collapse. There is so much research out there on that particular item, colony collapse, and I really don't think we have gotten down to what the problem is. I don't want to go back to pesticides, but I did read something that was very interesting to me, where there was a study done where if they keep subjecting the bees to pesticide, eventually they don't sleep, they don't get rest, they just get worn out basically, and they think that might be a factor, but that's still just in research phase. I read a lot of different researches about it, but I don't think we know where we are, and that's why it's so important. But again, not just honeybees, all pollinators, to make sure we're planting gardens that the pollinators can use, and trying to reduce the amount of pesticides that we use to make sure that we still make them sustainable. But as to my thoughts on it, we really don't know what's going on in my mind. So I think there is some more research that needs to be done. Now, when you go to plants and that's kind of the reason I tried to get a list of things that would go away without pollinators, and there is conflicting information out there just because people are trying to get plants that can self-pollinate it. And I think that is something that maybe could be good. However, if you go back and look at the big picture, if we allow the pollinators to be eliminated, not only are we talking food, we're talking about these beautiful flowers and beautiful plants that we go out and see. And I believe that pollinators are needed to keep the nature balance out there. So it bothers me to some sense that they are looking into things like that, because I think the real thing we should be looking at is keeping our pollinators healthy and making sure they survive, and we keep that balance so we can all go out. If hiking's your thing, whatever, we can all go out and enjoy the beautiful blooms and the plants and the trees that the pollinators keep sustainable.
I totally agree. Thank you.
And that is just my opinion, but I'm passionate about bees in one, but pollinators. But yeah, thank you.
Are there legal restrictions on having bees in the city limits of Chattanooga?
The only legal part that I am aware of is that you have to register your hives. And there's a lot of reasons for that. If you register your hives, and so one of the diseases a varroa mite might carry is something called American foul brood, which if a colony in a surrounding area gets it, all the bees within 5 miles are subjected to get that, and it's very nasty. Or there's nothing you can really do for a hive that gets that. So you do have to register your hives, and there's 2 benefits of that. One thing is if they know of a bee colony that gets sick around you, they will notify you. And if they know of someone who is spraying pesticides for some manner, they will notify you. Anything the state knows, they will notify you. And the second thing is if someone gets stung and is possibly allergic and it causes a death, you will not be liable because there's not 100% certainty that the bee came from your colony. So that's another benefit of registering your hive, is the state takes on that liability of someone getting killed. Now, since I brought up that subject, I'm going to go back. Very few people are allergic to honeybees, but it does happen. And unfortunately, some people are allergic, but the bad case doesn't come on until they're stung a few times. So beekeepers are about 30% more likely to get to the point where if they get stung, it causes a bad reaction. And I tell you that because this started as a family venture. My husband would go out with me. I was probably the most of the beekeeper, but my family would help me too. And my daughter and I always picked on my husband because I would get stung. It would be like a mosquito bite the next day, but he would swell up huge. One time he got stung on the neck, and we actually work in the same office in TVA. But he got stung the night before. We went into the office and people were dropping by my office saying, "I can't believe you let your husband come to work today." And I was like, "What?" And I went over there and his neck was swollen up huge. We'd go to the doctor. They'd say that's a normal reaction. Some people just swell to that point. Well, last summer, he actually was 30 feet away, brought out some hive equipment that I forgot to bring out, dropped it off, and a bee stung him. And we ended up in the emergency room because he got stung on his left arm and got hives on his right arm. And that's when you're in trouble. If you ever get stung one place and you have a reaction somewhere else on your body, go to the doctor, go to the emergency room. Now, fortunately, his throat did not close, but we did find out he is highly allergic to honeybees, and he is in the process of getting shots for that. And he carries an EpiPen all the time because he knew that honeybees were my passion. So he lets me keep them here. And I do try to move the hives. But anyway, so I wanted to get on that. There is a possibility, but I think only 2 to 3% of the people in the world are allergic to honeybees. A lot of people are allergic to wasps and feel like they're allergic to honeybees. But like I told you at the beginning, those are two different creatures, bees and honeybees. I probably went off on something else, but I think I answered your question. If I didn't, let me know. Are there any other? Oh,
I was just gonna say, feel free to go on.
okay.
You can take more questions at the end.
Okay. Am I running out of time?
Oh, no, I'm just saying, if you
Okay.
want to go on.
All right. So the second time that queen may leave the hive is if they're swarming. And what that is, which sometimes I get busy and I fall victim to this on my own hives a lot of time. And what that is if they're in a hive area, the colony's in a hive and they're getting crowded to propagate the species, the queen that's in there will gather up probably 2/3 of the worker bees, probably a few of the drones, and they will go move off, land somewhere and gather up in a bunch like you see here and look for a new home. The bees that are left, the third of the worker bees, and the honey and pollen they leave will, like I told you, create a new queen, because if they have an egg, they can create a new queen and they will continue in that same location. The bees that leave will go hang out somewhere, and these scout bees will go search for a home before they move them. Well, as you can imagine, people come out and see these group of bees hanging in their yard or whatever, and they don't want them there. This is a particular set of bees that I went and rescued downtown. It was actually in a parking lot, and all the guys that worked there didn't want to get in their car, so I went to get those bees. I have a video on it of our getting them. This was the first swarm that we went to collect. But what you don't see, this was a huge swarm, but what you don't see is that that's a pipe laying there, and there are probably twice as many bees in the pipe as there. And when they swarm, like I said, they're not protecting a hive, their home. So they're very gentle, believe it or not. And I dug all the bees out of that and took these home. But I just wanted to show you that. If you ever come out and find a ball of bees out in your front yard, there's a few things you can do. I've got a number that I'll show you later. You can call a swarm line. You can call me. If I am available, I will come and get them. But if not, you can just wait it out, and after probably a day, depending on the weather, but a day, they'll move on to somewhere else because they found their home. But the one thing you got to be careful is make sure they're not finding a little crevice in your home to build in. But most of the time they're not. They're just looking for another home to be, and that's what you'll see. So The other thing that beekeepers do is we build swarm traps. We build little boxes to put out in the woods, put in different places, and we bait them with things that the honeybees like to find. And they'll actually move in these swarm traps thinking that they'll build a home, and then we just incorporated them in our house. So that's what I've got here. This video is like 30 minutes long, but I wanted you to see how the bees group together and form in the bees. I will say that I was so excited when I got out there and I saw these bees starting to form, because I thought I had caught a huge swarm of bees, and then I found out they swarmed from one of my colonies, but at least I did catch them, and I put them in a different hive. So then I had two, but there is a drone that makes an appearance there, but this is something what you might see when I back out. I was just getting close. But when they actually formed, there was a beard of bees that hung about 3 times the size, hung off the bottom of that. And they eventually, this was toward the end where they were all moving in. And that's just a box that I put up to catch them. But like I said, if you ever find a group of bees out in your yard and you want to get rid of them, I have to tell you, this is a swarm hotline. You can call them. This is a Tennessee Valley Beekeepers Association, which myself, I'm part of. Nancy Williams, which I talked about her earlier, she's a part of, and they will find a beekeeper in your area to come get the swarm. You can also call me. If you can't remember, I'll give my contact information. But then again, if you just let them be, like I said, in about a day, they're going to end up leaving. If you are interested in bees, I don't want to be a huge advertisement, but if you are interested in bees, our association has a mentor program that you can sign up for and get your first colony of bees, and they'll help you get a hives at a reduced price. If you understand, if you are interested in bees, it's an expensive hobby. I love doing it. I spend the money, but it is something that you've got to be dedicated to. There is some physical part that you have to be able to pick up the boxes and things like that. So it is physically intense at times. To me, it's worth it. But, you know, if you want bees, there's other options. Like I told you, there's a mentor class. If you contact beekeepers around the area, some will, depending on how much land you have, some will put hives on your land for no cost and give you honey. But if you have a smaller patch and it's just one colony, they may charge you a little bit to maintain that hive. There's all kinds of options for you to get bees on your land if you're interested. And beekeepers normally are more than excited to mentor a new beekeeper coming along, so you will always be able to find help. When I started the Master Gardener, Tom Stebbins always had a quote at the end, so I felt like I had to have a quote that words are like bees, some create honey while others leave a sting. I try to live my life that way. I'm not perfect, of course, but I try to remember what I say. If I don't have something good to say, I guess my mom told me don't say it. I'm trying to be that person. And last, here is my contact information. If you have any questions after this, but if not, I will open it up. That's all the slides I have, and I will open it up to any questions or any comments or any words of wisdom you have out there. I'm good with that too.
Kendra, I just wanted to make a point about the hexagon shape of the bee.
Yes.
You had a wonderful slide where it was the one with all the holes filled with little pollen and nectar. Can you go back to that?
Certainly.
It turns out that in nature, the hexagon is the ideal shape. And it's because the sides connect perfectly and they don't leave any gaps or spaces. They're if you look at it, it's completely connected. There's no, like if these were circles, like a circle can often leave a space. But in nature, the hexagon is made to connect on all sides. And if anybody's been following the new telescope, that went out into deep space. The telescope is made of hexagonal shaped panels because when they slid them into place, they fit absolutely tightly. So one could either say that the telescope is made based on what bees do. But that is at any rate what the hexagonal was. So it, could have developed that way just evolution wise.
And I think too, it's a function of also it being a fairly stable, strong shape relative to, I mean, if you did squares, all of those sides would touch as well, but the sides are more susceptible to collapsing, where there's something in that six-sided structure that gives it more integrity.
Yes. True.
Exactly. And it's also uses, it's efficient in the fact that it takes a minimal amount of wax or to create the comb. In other words, so they don't have to waste any of that product in order to create the that array of spaces. And it may come from the fact that their head shaped too. It could, all of that. I'm sure that's part of it.
Well, I mean, of course, not to get too religious, but I mean, I think that you're right. It was created just perfectly because they knew that shape was the strongest, but they have to have some way to measure it, is what he was saying. He was saying that that's the space on top of their head.
Right. But I think that, all those elements. But I thought when I saw if anybody's seen pictures of that telescope, it's really cool.
I'll have to look that up.
Oh yeah, it's the James Webb telescope.
James Webb, all right.
And they put it together. It went into space, all collapsed, and when it was in space, they put each of those pieces into what became the mirror.
Right. And too, if I didn't mention it before, you could see these are bees from one colony, and you notice one of them has a very dark abdomen and one has a little light abdomen. So that was two different drone. They have two different dads and one mom. Any other questions for me? Or comments?
Feel free to speak up.
I do have a question. I live in a 4-story apartment. I'm on the top in a balcony, and I have a balcony. And what would be some flowers that you would recommend that I could plant to attract pollinators that would do well in pots?
Plants that would do well in pots.
Anybody else feel free to weigh in with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Cleome is one which you used.
Yes.
Zinnias, I think, are also good. And
Yes.
There's a plant that I get put in my boxes called Penta. It has a sort of it's a full shape, but what's great about them is they keep flowering, and they're very easy to maintain, but I have bees all over mine.
So you pronounce that Cleome. The one thing I like about them is that they will be blooming when other sources of pollen and nectar are in a shortage or declining. You could still have them blooming, and they do have that. So I will go out there. I didn't realize that's how you pronounced it, but I will go out there and at the beginning of summer and plant a row of them, then later plant another row, and then plant another row, so they can have stages of them throughout the summer and on to the fall, where the pollen and nectar kind of fall off.
Those pentas are great. And one thing that I always like to do, go to the nursery center and then just walk around and then buy some of what you see bees swarming all over, and just, look at the adult size and make sure you're not getting some of those flowers. I love those too. And I thought they were cleomes. I don't know how to pronounce it. Those can get really big.
Yes.
So make sure you have space, or you get a variety that'll be small. But yeah, I mean, that's how I found the pentas. I didn't know what they were, Suzanne. But there were just bees swarming all over them when I went to the nursery. So that's kind of how I'll pick too, is what bees are swarming on.
Exactly. Yes. And I know a lot of people like zinnias, and I also grow lantanas. I grow perennial lantana, and that is a total bee magnet.
And butterflies too.
And butterflies. And then there's also butterfly weed. Is another one. I think and things like even butterfly bush, which isn't exactly, or buddleia is not, it is not a host plant, but it's certainly a pollinator friendly plant.
And that
Yeah,
wild
I was
ones-
gonna, oh, I
that
was gonna
wild
say
one sale is
lantana.
coming up. They're a really good source for pollinator plants.
And the other thing you can do, if where you live will allow it, is allow your lawn to grow. Don't mow it down to a little stub. Let the clover come up, especially in the early spring. That is one of the few things that's out, and the bees will be very happy to have that source of food. I do that and hope that my neighbors don't notice, and I don't worry about. I do that in the front, and then in the back I let it go to. However, I let a few weeds come up from here to there, and it's interesting because I had an area where I just let it go, and there is something growing all through from spring through fall, like with a flower on it. I didn't always know what it was, but so nature sort of handles that, and the bees are pretty happy about that, but definitely the clover.
And I would add too that, but always make sure you do your research. You go to the nursery and you get something with bees over it, and you become passionate. For example, sunflowers. I obviously love those. I plant a lot of those around up here where I live, but they're actually, because of the way they're modifying plants now, there are actually some sunflowers out there that don't have the pollen for the bees. So if you decide to go out for a different cultivar or a different version of what you like, you might want to do your research to check and make sure that they're still good for the bees. If that's your goal.
Yes, and make sure that they're made with they're grown without pesticides, especially the one that's very bad for butterflies that I can't remember the name of. Somebody jump in if you can. The nicotinoids. You don't want those in there. Yeah, passion flowers for sure, cone flowers. Somebody was saying, and lavender. Yeah, and a lot of herbs, I had some oregano that flowers all the time, and
Hyssop.
So you can grow some herbs on your balcony. Monarda, all those. You could get a pamphlet from the Tennessee, let me look it up, that will tell you what plants are bee friendly. Just Google plants for native bees or plants for bees, and you'll find some information. Oh yeah, somebody asked about what the native bees were. Do we have what are there any native bees in our area that you know of particularly?
Yes, I mean, of course, you've got sweat bees that we all are familiar with, but there are some types of squash bees that are native to this area. And I'm not as good on that because I've had trouble finding them. I have found one of the little native bees. I'm not good on those. I will pass that on to somebody else, but squash bees are definitely in this area, but they're of course declining just like everything is. But once I started making bee friendly habitats, I have noticed them coming back. I just haven't been able to get a picture. The squash bees are the one I know of. Does anybody else know of a native bee?
Did you grind up some coffee?
No, but I'll.
Oh,
do that.
okay, all right.
I'll see
Remember
how
to
my-
mute yourselves, people.
What is,
I have one, I'm gonna put something in the chat. It's a website for, oh, where is it? Oh, there I am, sorry. Landscaping for native with native plants. And it's put out by the, where is it? It's put out by the, anyway, it's a good chart of what you can grow, trees, shrubs, all kinds of information. I put the link in the chat. I highly recommend it. I use it as a reference myself. And it's extremely helpful. Okay, back to you, Kendra.
Oh, okay. Are there any other questions for me? I do have to confess, one of my, I do try to plant bee friendly things, but my other passion with as far as gardening per se is the fig trees. I love figs. I have 12 different varieties planted on my property. And my dad, before he passed, would always be humored by that. He goes, "Why are you passionate about the one thing that you don't need pollinators for?" I was like, I don't know. But anyway, there are a type of fig that you do have to have a wasp to go in and pollinate it. But most of the cultivars that we have are the common fig, like the brown turkey, Celeste, and those type figs. They are self-pollinating.
A lot of those
I have a-
pollinators seem to enjoy the figs as a snack, though. I know you know that too.
Oh, yes.
Careful when you're picking them.
Yes.
Yes, they do, especially if you let them get ripe.
Yes.
I have a Chicago Hardy, and I do see those red wasps
Oh, yes.
flying around them. I don't worry about them. I just know that they're doing their thing. Okay, if we've exhausted Kendra's knowledge of bees, Kendra, if you want to stop sharing,
Okay.
pray, so we can all see each other.
Sounds good.
We are. Hello, everybody. And I would just like to take this time to thank Kendra. And I think we could all unmute ourselves and give her a round of applause.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And I know that I'm sure that Kendra wouldn't, since she put her email and information in the chat actually, Kendra, if you want to go to the chat and put that information in there so people can copy it,
Okay.
that would be great. And then I know we all have gotten an appreciation for bees. And how important they are. And I guess you and the beekeepers will be at the expo, right?
Yes.
So if you want to see more about bees, come, well, you'll all be, those of you who are master gardeners will be working the expo. So you'll be able to see Kendra and the bee exhibit, but they will be there with that.
Yes, but the Tennessee Valley Beekeepers Association I talked to the president the other day. He is gonna contact you about having a booth, but I think I'm actually gonna do I'm talking to somebody about doing this talk there too.
Great. Well, this is wonderful. Thank you all for coming. The next third Saturday class will be a month from today on March 19th. Topic to be determined. So look for our Facebook page, and let me quickly do this. This has been streamed live on the Master Gardener Facebook page, and it stays there. So if you want to go back and look at it again, and anything that you just want to refresh your memory, or if you want to see any of the other videos from the third Saturday classes, go there and you can watch those. And if you're a Master Gardener or a new intern, you get a CEU for that. Go to the videos tab, and you can see it there. Let me just quickly put this in the chat. But that's our Facebook page, where you will see all about the Master Gardeners. But they're all there. So I will now thank Kendra again. Thank you all for coming. I am going to stop the recording, and I will